So I am going to start the meeting for the Consolidated Land Use Board. It is 5:33 on March 13th. I will do roll call to the best of my ability. Bailey Goodwine. Bailey?
Yes, here.
Okay. John
Sorry.
Calvin. Caitlin Schiller here. Jonathan Hedinger
Here.
and Tori Lyons.
Here.
Okay, great. And we have three board members who are excused. They have notified me beforehand that they will not be able to attend. One's sick, two are out of town and not able to attend remotely. So the first thing on our agenda is the election of board officers. Just really briefly, I serve as the secretary for this board. So as far as taking minutes and putting out agendas, I will take care of that. But we do need a chair and a vice chair. The role of the chair is to run the meetings and to just kind of maintain the quorum during meetings. If you're unsure, we certainly have some kind of go-bys and things, phrases you use, things you look for, things you do. Staff is happy to help with that. The vice chair's responsibility is to serve as the meeting chair if the chair is unable to be here. So to step in for the chair. So I will open it up. Is there anybody who would like to nominate someone? And I believe you can nominate yourself if you would like to serve in that capacity. We're doing the chair right now.
I'd like to nominate Jessie Wilcox to be the chair.
Have you talked to her?
I have talked to her.
Okay, and she's.
That's
okay
who
with
I
that?
would like to nominate as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, as long as she is aware of that. It's a little unusual, but that is fine. So, okay. Motion to nominate Jessie, Bailey is seconded. Anyone else?
In favor?
Okay,
As a non-voting member, I'll just say that she did a great job as chair of the planning board. I have not had the opportunity to talk to her, so I don't know what her appetite is, but
I guess I talked to her and asked her if she'd be okay with it. And she said yes, but it was a month or so ago, so I don't.
I'm wondering, since we're nominating somebody who isn't here, if we could just wait. Is that a possibility, or is it really important that we nominate somebody tonight?
I'm gonna let y'all decide that. I asked Grant if we could push this off. He said we should move forward, but if you guys are kind of running this board. You're serving this in the advisory capacity, and if you're not comfortable with it, then we could certainly do that.
could it be a tentative nomination pending?
We can do a tentative. I know Jessie and I have a feeling she'll be fine with it, but I don't want to commit her to that. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And then the vice chair, if they're willing to serve as the chair, if she doesn't want to, then we can go that route. How about, does that work for you guys? This is a very strange meeting. It's not always going to be like this. Okay, so we have Jonathan nominated Jessie Wilcox, Bailey seconded. Is there anybody else who wants to nominate somebody, or would you guys like to go ahead and vote? No nominations? Okay. You want to go ahead and vote? All in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay. That is 4 ayes, so I'm not even going to call for the nays. Okay, since Jessie is not here, she can't run this meeting, so. Would any of you like to nominate someone else or yourselves for vice chair? We can put that off until the next meeting. Yeah, we'll do that. I'll talk to Jessie. We'll get this figured out. For now, and I'm sorry, that means you're gonna have to listen to my voice for the rest of the time as far as when Catherine is not speaking. We'll defer vice chair, election until the next meeting. And Jessie, if she is willing, will be the new chair. If she's not willing, then we'll vote on two. Okay. There is no approval of minutes. So we did not, the last meeting we had, there were no formal minutes. It was a training purpose meeting. It was, the public could attend if they wanted, but it was for training purposes, so we don't have any minutes of that available, but we will, I think we actually have posted, but I'll check the training video in case people want to attend, because it was just basically informational about land use law in Montana and zoning and the role of the Consolidated Land Use Board. All right, public comments. We have affordable housing on the agenda. But I would say, in this case, if you want to comment on housing affordability, I think that would be okay. If anybody wants to make a comment, Patricia, would you like to?
Probably be able to make comment on affordable housing when it comes up as well, or just now?
I mean, it's not something we're taking action on. I certainly don't mind, but I'd like to keep it kind of brief. So if you have something you'd like to say, I think now would. And I don't have a sign-in list, but I will, if you just state your name and address as usual, I'll take care of it.
And I have just something nice. for
Oh, these
people.
are awesome.
You
You want me to hand them out?
would you mind?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't mind at all, and I have one, so.
Okay.
What?
And anybody in the audience who might like one too, it's just, it's nice. Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's mine already, but I
It has to do with this unique town we're in. As we are the only, and I'm doing.
Patricia, I'm sorry, just for the record, can you
Oh, I'm
say your
sorry, I'm
name?
Patricia Grable, 204 East Calendar Street. I live at the Grable Hotel
Thank you,
that my
ma'am.
grandfather built in 1908. The hotels in downtown Livingston were built at the same time that Old Faithful Inn was built. 1903, our Depot Center went up, the Murray went up, Park Hotel went up. And so this is kind of a fun for your living room or whatever you enjoy, because we have this unique heritage on the planet. We are the first entrance, and actually entrance, but they call it rail entrance to the first national park in the world, and there will never be anything like us. So all of these 20 hotels downtown were built at the same time that those beautiful hotels were built in Yellowstone National Park, and it's part of my heritage. My father was named Harry Grable after Harry Childs, who built Old Faithful Inn, and there was a close relationship between the park's beautiful hotels and our stunningly beautiful hotels. We went through a period of neglect. We went through a period in which our economy was no longer totally dependent on Yellowstone Park when the shops grew. And then in the 40s, people remember the history of Livingston. But I've come back, and just because everybody married late, and I'm getting up there in years, I've come back to, with all the records and all the information on this amazing period in our history. Now, I took the Grabo and I ran it as affordable housing for almost 20 years. So I know all that occurs with affordable housing. And I'm president of the Downtown Building Owner Business Association. And we are the people who own those buildings downtown. My asking you sincerely to never again turn these stunning hotels into public housing, or even that what has to happen for our beautiful community to survive economically, and I will present material to this board, is for our wonderful hotels to again come back in. And in the Gray Bowl, for example, we're condominiumized. We have rentals, we have a hotel, we have a couple of affordable units in the hotel. But in order to survive, for my building to not go under, we can no longer have anything but mixed use for our hotels. So when we talk about affordable housing, we must talk outside the commercial district. It must, and there is no owner that I've talked to, and I've talked to them all, and over 15 years, I've talked to them all. There isn't an owner who ever wants ever again to sell a unit to HRDC or anything else, because what happened with public housing, we lost workforce housing in the Sherwood apartments because it became public housing, and then it was no longer workforce housing. Then in the Miles building, we lost affordable housing because it became public housing and it was no longer affordable housing. So it is really important that, and I tried to get a hold of the HRDC board, because I think our building owners whose livelihood and the businesses that we support really deserve to be heard. And can you imagine Livingston with about 4 or 5 more Murrays downtown and people coming to visit our town and boost our economy? Thank you very much for your
Thanks,
time.
Patricia. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Okay. There is no one else online besides myself and Bailey, so we will close public comments. And the first item on the agenda under planning items, we have nothing under zoning tonight, is an affordable housing presentation by Catherine Daly. She is the Park County Housing Coalition Program Manager. And she's going to present an overview of the PCHC's 2024 work plan, including how the city and PCHC are collaborating on housing initiatives and providing information about housing affordability in the city of Livingston. Let me share. Right. Bailey, can you see that on your end?
Maybe we could.
Yeah, and I read through it, through the packet too. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, all right. Good evening, new Consolidated Land Use Board members. Thank you so much for having me here to talk a little bit about what the Park County Housing Coalition is working on this year. Like Jennifer said, my name is Catherine Daly, and I'm the Park County Housing Coalition Program Manager. And I'm going to be presenting a presentation to you tonight that I shared with the Park County Housing Coalition membership on March 1st. I left the date there because I'm doing this as part of a little roadshow that the coalition is undertaking to try and get the word out about what we're working on this year. This presentation is exactly the same presentation that we shared with our coalition members and that I've been sharing with everybody else. So that's just a nod to the fact that everyone's getting the same information. So Jennifer, next slide. Yeah, so tonight I'll be talking to you about 3 things. I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the Park County Housing Coalition. Then I'm gonna briefly touch on what's going on in our housing market here in Park County. And then I'll review our work plan, which focuses on 3 tools recommended in the 2022 Park County Housing Action Plan. And those are accessory dwelling units, employer-assisted housing partnerships, and zoning reform. All right, next slide, please. So let's start with a little bit of background on the coalition. Basically, we're a program that's currently being incubated within the HRDC's Community Development Department, but we're also supported by a host of community partners and have been for a long time, including the Park County Community Foundation, the City of Livingston, Park County Environmental Council, Montana State University Extension Park County, Livingston Healthcare, Opportunity Bank. The list is ever growing, and it's wonderful to have so many supportive partners. Our mission, in short, is just to increase opportunities for Park County residents to access housing where we can afford to live and thrive. Next slide, please. So I like to think about our work in terms of 2 phases. Phase 1 focused on research and planning and took place from roughly 2020 to mid 2023. So 2020 was the year the coalition was reconvened in response to broadening interest in addressing the community's housing challenges. The following year in 2021, the coalition completed the Park County Housing Needs Assessment, which among other things found that only 20% of households in Park County earned enough to afford a mortgage for a single family home at median list price. The following year, the coalition completed the Housing Action Plan that I mentioned, which recommends 12 tools to address the housing needs identified in the prior year's assessment. This document was subsequently adopted by local elected officials into the City of Livingston and Park County's growth policies. Next slide, please.
Go to the next slide.
There we go. So phase 2 is all about implementing the Housing Action Plan's 12 recommended tools and policies in a way that reflects community interest and capacity and also leverages changes to policy and regulation at the national, state, and local levels. We're also trying to sustain and build collaborative partnerships around community housing. Our coalition membership is now almost at 100, and we have more than 300 email subscribers. And as I mentioned, we have a bunch of very supportive community partners that are contributing time and financial resources to support this effort. Last year, the community raised nearly all of the funds necessary for the HRDC to hire a Park County resident to lead these efforts full time for 3 years. So that's me. We also convened a 9-person steering committee that has been really, really helpful in guiding this work. One of our steering committee members is here this evening, so I'd just like to recognize Jamie. Thank you so much for being here. Next slide, please. So let's talk very briefly about what's going on in Park County's housing market. Generally speaking, we're seeing a lack of mobility in which people are either locked out of housing in the community or locked into homes that may not be meeting their needs. Something really interesting about our community is that 30% of Park County's households rent and about 70% own. And we're seeing home prices that neither group can afford. Next slide, please. So the estimated median rent is about $434 more per month than the maximum the median renting household can afford. And only approximately 8% of owner households and 4% of renter households in Park County could afford a home priced at or above the December 2023 median list price of $649,000. So as I mentioned, the 2021 Housing Needs Assessment found that only 20% of households in Park County could afford that home at median list price, and now that share has decreased. Next slide, please. So I don't want to dwell on some pretty tough challenges that we're facing. I'd love to focus on what we're trying to do to address them. So the coalition is by nature public facing. So our work plan is sort of the public facing work that we are conducting this year. So the 2024 work plan prioritizes 3 of those 12 tools recommended in the Housing Action Plan. And the implementation of these tools builds on recommendations made by the coalition's 2022 subcommittees. So we had a couple working groups working on this last winter, and ideas generated by participants during a conversation we hosted last November, as well as those changes to national, state, and local policy that help make the implementation of these tools more effective. We've also pulled in, emerging research to inform our choice of tools as well, which I'll talk about with our next slide. So I'll start with our accessory dwelling unit pilot program, which is tool number 8 in the housing action plan. Accessory dwelling units, you might have heard them referred to as ADUs, or funner names like casitas or alley houses or mother-in-law units, which are all names that reveal how this housing type has been used in our community for generations. In short, accessory dwelling units are smaller, independent living spaces that share a lot with a larger primary home. And their smaller size, ability to provide multi-generational housing, and the fact that they don't require an empty lot to build on mean that they can meet several of the community's housing challenges. One of these is that a full third of Park County's households are people living alone. And we currently lack homes that are appropriately sized for these households. So presently, there are about 2 single-person households for every studio and 1-bedroom home in the county. So we're really, really short on this smaller housing type. Furthermore, nearly a quarter of our population is age 65 or older. If you go further down the scale to folks age 50 and older, we're closer to half. And I know this because I recently submitted a grant to the AARP, so they asked me about this. Anecdotally, I'm hearing that some folks in our community are stuck in homes that are too large, require too much maintenance, and don't have needed accessibility features. So when I talk about our housing market having a lack of mobility and people being locked into homes that are no longer working for them, this is part of what I'm talking about. And ADUs can be designed with accessibility features that allow people's mobility to change throughout their life and for them to age in place comfortably, potentially with family members in a primary dwelling unit or using the primary dwelling unit as an additional source of income. Last but not least, as you likely know, land is really expensive, and ADUs sidestep for the need for land acquisition because it empowers homeowners to build this small, flexible housing topology on land that they already own. So it doesn't require an external entity to come in with a bunch of land or for us to raise a bunch of money to acquire additional land. The Coalition's 2022 Workforce Housing Subcommittee recommended facilitating the creation of ADUs. This was announced at the Park County Housing Coalition's April 2023 meeting. A couple months later, Headwaters Economics came out with the Amenity Trap, which is a report detailing the challenges facing communities like ours that are gateways to national parks and other outdoor resources. And one of the tools that they recommended to address those communities' housing challenges are accessory dwelling units. And last but not least, these endorsements combined with the state's new law that removes regulatory barriers to ADU construction and the Federal Housing Administration's new lending policy that was announced last October signals that the time is right for us to pilot an ADU program. So we have a lot of community support, and all these levers at different levels are aligning, so it makes it worth it to try. So this year, our program has 2 parts. The first is a course on ADU financing, which is going to be taking place on April 11th from about 11:30 to 12:30. It's going to be geared toward professionals working in the sectors of construction and building, real estate and finance to help them all build a shared understanding of the financing mechanisms available for accessory dwelling units. And that is so that they can accurately and responsibly guide their clients toward opportunities to create an ADU if they're a homeowner with a primary dwelling unit or a developer considering designing a subdivision with single-family homes that include ADUs. The second component of this program is for homeowners and is designed to empower homeowners who want to build an ADU that will provide opportunities for community members to age in place and or afford to continue living in Park County. All right, next slide, please. So tool number 2 in the housing action plan is employer-assisted housing partnerships. This is distinct from employer-run housing. I just want to make that very clear. And as you can see on the slide, that first goal is untether housing from specific jobs. We are not trying to make it easier for employers to build housing that captures their employees and means that if they lose their job, they also lose their housing. what we are trying to do is to support employers who want to understand and implement either demand or supply side strategies, and I can talk more about what that means in a minute, to help their current employees access and remain in healthy housing in our community and improve recruitment and retention rates. So this can look a variety of ways. They might say, oh, well, it looks like employees in our sector, maybe retail trade and leisure and hospitality, are most likely to be renting. And for this group, we would love to do a matched rental reserve account program. And maybe we can, if it seems like this would be a success for employees in this sector, maybe we can invite other employees in this sector to join and contribute to matched rental reserve accounts for workers across the sector more broadly. A supply side solution might be, well, we're an employer that has land that is available to develop. We don't necessarily have a lot of financial resources, but we'd love to figure out a pathway for developing this land with housing that can be accessible to folks in, let's say, education, healthcare, and social assistance who are earning roughly the same income bracket. So that everybody in that sector could have access to housing that's set at that level. So we would like to provide support to employers in Park County's 5 economic sectors that represent about 70% of the county's jobs. Jennifer, next slide. We thought this would be a way to create the most impact. And these sectors are professional and business services, education, healthcare, and social assistance, construction, leisure and hospitality, and retail trade. And as you can see on the slide, on average, folks working in these sectors fall into 3 annual earning groups. Obviously, these estimated average annual earnings for one person vary differently within these sectors and depending upon who it is, but this is the best available data that we have from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which publishes average annual earnings by sector. So that's where this is coming from. It's not intended to capture the entire breadth of everybody working in those industries. But again, we hope to provide technical support to employers in these sectors to see which solutions will best meet their employees' needs. And this support will be tailored to the resources and strengths of each employer and the needs of those employees. So as I mentioned, it might look like clarifying employees' housing needs. Maybe this employer is actually not sure what they are, and we can help them figure that out, to providing information on establishing rental or down payment assistance programs or interest rate buy-down programs, to considering pathways to the development of housing on property the employer owns. And as I mentioned, one goal is to identify solutions that could theoretically be extended to workers across these sectors. So it wouldn't just be like, we're trying to boost the competitiveness of specific employers. We're trying to find solutions that could be applied broadly to sectors that employ 70% of the county's workforce. So we do need employers in these sectors to step forward. I have started working with a couple of them to make a commitment to contribute to the community's housing solutions. So if you know of an employer that is ready to make that commitment and wants to get some free technical assistance and start exploring solutions, we would love to hear from you. And also employees, you're welcome to nominate your employers. Of course, we're trying to target employers with the capacity to engage with something like this. We certainly don't expect a small business owner with no employees to come up with this on their own, which is again why we're targeting folks in these sectors so that we can extend the results of our work throughout the county to employers with fewer resources. All right, next page. So last but not least, Tool 9 in the Housing Action Plan is zoning reform, and this year the coalition will be participating in the City of Livingston's plan zoning regulation update, which is slated to begin in June. Obviously, the Park County Housing Coalition doesn't have the jurisdictional authority to initiate a zoning update, so we are following the lead of those that do, and we are grateful that the City of Livingston is making this a priority. Generally, our goal is to ensure that changes to the regulation are clear, complementary, and allow for more abundant housing at the sizes and prices our community members need and can afford. Next slide, please. So this is just what I shared with our members about how to participate in the work. I'm particularly curious if you know of folks who want to participate in our ADU pilot program, or you want to nominate your employer to receive technical support as part of our employer assisted housing partnership program. Of course, you're welcome to subscribe to our email list to just keep tabs on what we're doing. Next slide, please. And last but not least, I mentioned some of our community supporters. So these are some folks in the community who provided financial support for our work to date, and we have a couple more coming up hopefully later this year. So big hearty thank you to them. And that's the end of this presentation. And then I'd be happy to take some questions on that and then talk a little bit about the professional services agreement that I have with the city of Livingston to help them to provide technical assistance to them related to housing affordability and interpreting their PUD ordinance and so forth. Right, any questions about the presentation?
I actually do have a question. So sometimes I'll read about, you know, nationwide, the nation is short 1 million houses or something like that. Do you have an understanding of how many housing units were short in Park County?
We made a guess of that after the housing needs assessment and with some of the work the subcommittee was doing. And I would also say that because the data available for our geography is not super reliable, I am trying to tend to focus on the types of housing and the share of types of housing that we have, which is why I'm framing it in terms of we understand that we have this share of households of this size in the county, and we roughly estimate that we have half that number of, you know, homes that are appropriately sized for those groups. I'm reluctant to get the community fixated on exact number of homes.
But you're saying half, like roughly half of the needed homes are not built yet.
Well, you know, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, something that we do understand is that we have households, a third of Park County's households are single person households. And we only have half the number of studio and 1-bedroom apartments or homes that are available to serve those household sizes. So we estimate that we're short on that size of home. But I'm reluctant because I'm not, the ACS data about the exact number of those homes is not super reliable. And so if I give you a number, the margin of error could be, yeah, I think it's more useful to talk about share.
Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for all that you do and HRDC does. We really appreciate all their work, and especially the housing downtown is really great. I was wondering, you were talking about the how it's gotten worse. How much, I mean, it's getting worse by the year, is that right? Or how has the problem been changing over the last few years?
Well, I think the measure that I mentioned from the 2021 needs assessment was that only 20% of households in Park County could afford a home at median list price. And now that's less than 10% of households in Park County can afford a home at median list price. So that's one measure. And if you look back at this slide, right, our single family median home list prices have increased more than 130%, and interest rates have more than doubled since 2020. That estimate of the share of Park County households that are cost burdened is from the American Community Survey, which I expect to be, again, I expect to be low. Which is why it says 28% with a plus next to it. We know that the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies came out with some research a couple months ago that suggested that like half of our renters nationwide at least are cost burdened. So I would expect that number to be higher in Park County. Again, rent is difficult to track. My estimated median rent came from me just scraping property management websites by hand. I don't have a code that does that for me. The American Community Survey estimates median gross rent at below $900 a month. So again, like that's reflective of the data challenges that we are dealing with when we're trying to talk about this issue. Chris Smith with Headwaters Economics is on our steering committee. And something I've been discussing with them is how they can help us get better data to help track our progress on this issue. And actually, that's one of the things that I'm working on with the city of Livingston as well, is they're trying to get access to their old Microsoft Access database with all the past permitting data that I can analyze and then get a sense of how many types of homes were being permitted up to a certain point and how many are being permitted since the city has adopted new ordinances such as the PUD ordinance that went into effect last fall. Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I guess on the, so general zoning reform, so, that, we're going through the zoning code later, update later this year, but, are there other tools, like, so like a density bonus or something like that, does that play into zoning code reform, or how does that? Could you help explain?
Sure.
what zoning code reform means? And
Sure, it
yeah.
may, and that, you know, as you noted, that tool is called general zoning reform and flexible development standards. We've actually seen the implementation of flexible development standards and density bonuses within the city of Livingston already. So the planned unit development ordinance, which went into effect last year, includes density bonuses for housing that is built and will be available to families or households earning 100% of area median income and 60% of area median income. And I'm smiling when I say that because area median income is not the most fun topic to discuss, but I did include an informational pamphlet in your packets, which Jennifer, if you want to scroll down to, that I developed for the city of Livingston specifically to help folks understand and utilize that new ordinance
This was the
effectively.
page.
Yes, this is it. So it's a front and back. So the front part of the handout simply talks about what we're talking about when we say a home is affordable to somebody earning X income. And the US Department of Housing and Urban Development has long had a standard of 30% of your income going to housing. And if you're spending more on that, you're considered cost burdened. Fascinatingly, in 2021, there was some research conducted that was supported by Zillow that backed up that threshold. It's not just a rule of thumb. Basically, they found that there are changes which suggest increases in the population of people experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity once your median rent exceeds 30% of the median renter household income. Right? So there's actually some research behind this rule of thumb. Area median income is a measure that is used to estimate how much a community's residents can spend on housing. And that represents like the midpoint of a community's income distribution, meaning that like half the households in that community earn more than the median and half earn less. And this measure is established by the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they calculate it annually for different geographies. So for us, that's geography is Park County. And I can go into more depth there, but basically it's a threshold set by the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is then commonly used to figure out different income brackets that can be targeted for housing development.
This might be too in the weeds, but
Sure.
how does non-labor income, like, I think that non-labor income is a really high percentage in Park County, like, does that go into that, or like, is that just
I don't,
wages or?
so I don't know.
Okay.
The HUD, US Department of Housing and Urban Development, bases area median income off of median family income, which is a slightly different measure than median household income. And I don't know whether, I mean, I don't know how non-labor income, I assume it factors in, but I don't know that calculation. I do know that median family income tends to be higher than median household income. But that's all I'll say. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, so actually, Jennifer, if you want to go to the following page.
Yep.
So this page, after you learn a little bit about affordability, about this measure called area median income and how HUD determines it, we have these income thresholds that are set within the city of Livingston's planned unit development ordinance. And I've outlined what those thresholds mean based on the area median income threshold set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So a developer who reads the planned unit development ordinance and sees that they could get a density bonus or a height increase if they include a certain number of homes available at 100% of area median income in their development can look up and see exactly what that amount is and what the maximum amount households bringing in that amount of income could spend on housing without being cost burdened. At the bottom of the page, I've also included details on who in our community might be earning at these different income targets. So a single person, like a single person household earning 100% of area median income might be working in the fields of healthcare, education, construction, and social assistance. I've also included how much the share of our workforce that they represent. And I've done that also for the other target from the PUD ordinance, which is 60% area median income, and identified who might be earning less than 60% area median income. So again, when we're talking about housing affordability, I think it's really important not to sort of generalize. It's important to think about who would be earning what, right? Because it's all about what your income is and then what you can afford based on that. I think another important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about how much people can pay for housing is what they're going to use their residual income on, right? So subtract that 30% and then say, okay, whatever we have left over is going to go toward food, education, childcare, clothes, gas, car insurance, your phone bill, student loans, et cetera, et cetera.
Savings.
Yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
savings, right? And again, this brings it back to, okay, well, if it looks like the residual income is insufficient to provide for savings, then maybe that's an area where our employers can step in and pool some funds to create matched rental reserve accounts or mortgage reserve accounts or individual development accounts, that kind of thing. Those programs actually have been piloted in different places across the nation, including in Montana, and are very, very successful. Great question, Jonathan, though. I will look into how
Well, that's,
the extent to which
thank you.
non-labor income is incorporated into these.
I guess I'm gonna show a little bit of my ignorance here about building codes and zoning and things like that, but if we're saying that 33% of people live alone in Park County, or roughly that amount of people, is that how I understood that
Yeah,
correctly? And it seems like when we're looking at developments, at least just from my perspective, it seems like we're seeing family housing being put up, single family homes. Where's the disconnect between the developers and the need for these? Is it the cost? Is it more expensive to build one bedroom and studio apartments than it is to build single family homes? Do you have any insight into that?
that's a good question. I mean, I think just understanding the need and working with developers so that they're aware of what the need is in the community is really helpful. And that is also part of my role through the professional services agreement that we have with the city of Livingston, is I'll attend pre-application meetings with developers who are contemplating initiating a subdivision process, and we'll say, hey, here's what we know about our community, and here's how you could really meet their needs. So part of it is education. I've actually found that to be very, very effective. I mean, building small homes in particular, it can be a tough nut to crack because like a small home has all of the most expensive things in your home, right? Like your bathroom, your kitchen, all that stuff, and none of the additional floor space that would help defray the costs or of those really expensive items. So depending upon what you're trying to build, it can be expensive, particularly if you're going for a small standalone home. But yeah, I don't necessarily, I'm not aware that in a multifamily development, that like a studio is necessarily way more costly than a 1 or 2 bedroom. I don't think it is, yeah.
If I can add something to that, I understand that, banks play kind of a big role in what gets built as well. And what banks really like to give loans for is stuff that has proven to be successful in the past. And so there's a lot of like, status quo bias in that model. And so, you know, what might have worked here or nationally 30 years ago is kind of like what the banks are comfortable owning. That's kind of something that I've learned.
Yeah, and I'll just add, that's what's so wonderful about having a representative from a local bank on our steering committee, and they actually spearheaded the idea of having this ADU financing class, because it is a somewhat more unusual housing type. And so in order for folks to be able to get loans in the first place to build this housing type, all of these players in lending and real estate and construction need to have a shared understanding of like how to secure money to do it. And the banks have to be confident that they are getting appropriate appraisals and so forth. So yeah, that educational piece is something that we are working on actively.
I had one more question. I saw that short-term rental regulation was not prioritized. Just there, do you have any thoughts on why that wasn't prioritized?
Yeah, I do, which is that was a very, I mean, I wasn't involved in the housing coalition at the time of the adoption of the housing action plan. But my understanding is that people got very, very concerned about that provision of the housing action plan, specifically like a couple lines of that provision. And for whatever reason, and again, I can't speak to this because I wasn't participating in the process, but a lot of trust was lost in this organization as a result. And so our goal with these initiatives is to bring the public into the process in a way that they feel comfortable, and that they can learn about the organization and learn about how they can meaningfully affect housing outcomes in our community, while we are rebuilding those relationships. Again, it's still part of the housing action plan. I still think it's something that should be considered and discussed. And it was also part of Headwaters Economics amenity trap paper. I mean, it's a common tool that's used throughout the nation. And I want to make sure that our conversations are productive, and that they also don't prevent us from making meaningful strides in other areas. Basically, I don't want us to get tripped up on this one piece of the plan in a way that prevents us from getting anything done. So I'm not saying that might not be an area of focus in the future, but I wasn't getting the sense that that would lead to more trust in the organization or our ability to actually make change on this problem. Now, if I hear from community members that there is a lot of interest in working on this topic and sort of understanding what that would look like, I am happy to have those conversations. And at this point, I am interested in trying to make some meaningful progress and roll out some programs that our community members can fully support and participate in.
Thank you.
Wow.
I guess I had a question kind of related to that.
Yeah.
So you had that list of the tools from the housing action plan, and you had the 3 that you prioritized. What was the process for like deciding upon what you were gonna prioritize?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, like the tools that we selected were based on community feedback that we heard during our 2022 subcommittee working groups. Again, I wasn't really a participant in those groups, but we had a group focused on a community housing investment fund and a workforce housing subcommittee. And one of the recommendations from the workforce housing subcommittee was accessory dwelling units. And then, as I mentioned, we had these changes at the state and national levels that made the implementation of ADUs as a tool just seem like a really good time. Also, anecdotally, I'm just hearing that people want to build ADUs and they could use some help with it. So it does seem like that's strong. There's strong community support for that. As far as employer assisted housing partnerships go, That is also something anecdotally that I'm hearing some interest in, particularly because I'm aware of employers throughout the county who are contemplating trying to become developers, or employers who have become developers, and it's been a real struggle for them. You know, they went into the business of groceries or healthcare or education or any number of different fields, and that's what they do best. Like and now they are stretching themselves thin, trying to also manage housing construction and property management. Furthermore, we selected this because it emphasizes the link between housing and the economic competitiveness and performance of our county. And we think that's really, really important. And there's an opportunity to move the needle here. Furthermore, we selected it because this is a coalition and we need other community partners to step forward, and engaging the private sector is a really critical piece of that, and for them to step forward and say, you know, we need housing that will support our local labor pool, support and expand our local labor pool, make us more economically competitive and robust. I just think that that's a major priority for us. There isn't necessarily there aren't necessarily like national or state level policy changes that make that more or less easy to do, that facilitate that. But it did seem like it needed to be prioritized, particularly since a lot of that is relationship based and can take a long time to get off the ground. My position is only funded for 3 years. And so we wanted to start building that shared understanding and those relationships as soon as possible so that they have time to yield some results over the next 2 years. And then, like I said, with zoning reform, we have no jurisdictional authority over whether the city or the county undertake any kind of zoning reform. But this opportunity presented itself, and so we are participating. If we added any more tools to this, I think I would just fail abjectly, because this is already quite a lot of work. So we kept it there.
Is that it? Any other questions? This is awesome, as always. Yeah. Bailey, did you have any questions?
No, I think Catherine's doing a great job, and I think it'll be interesting to roll out these programs, and then in future developments, maybe include some requirements around housing types and that sort of stuff. So thank you, Catherine.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, board.
That was awesome, thanks. Okay, where are we? The agenda. Let's see, I think the next thing. This is me. Tentative work plan, for this board. And this is super tentative, it's more giving you an idea of what may be coming down the pipe. First, we finally released our request for proposals for the zoning code update. That request was issued March 7th, and the proposals are due by April 19th. And so that gels with the timeline that Catherine mentioned about. We think that we'll be starting on this process in June. The good part of this is a lot of the background research, the assessment of where there's conflicts in the code and the growth policy, where changes need to be made based on current best practices. That has actually, the heavy lifting has already been done. We were the recipients of Community Technical Assistance Program help earlier, last year in the fall. And they provided a report. They came in, they looked at our code, they looked at the growth policy, they looked at new state legislative laws, again, best practices, and kind of identified areas where there needs to be changes. and where things need to be modified, revised. So, we're asking the consultant that we select to kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, bless that assessment. If they have any other information or other ideas or other suggestions of what may need to be changed, we want them to include that too, but the heavy lifting, that work has already been done. So they'll be able to jump in a little further along than if we're just starting with the assessment of our code and growth policy. So this board's role in that process will be, once we move further along, and we have identified this board actually will look at, the first draft, I think, to get ideas, to say, here's where we've identified, where there needs to be changes. Maybe there's multiple options for that. And we're asking them also to explain sort of why, like what does this change mean for future development? Why is it necessary? So all of that will be available to the Consolidated Land Use Board. And ultimately, the Consolidated Land Use Board will, because this is a zoning code update and part of your purview is zoning, it will come before you, the draft, to either recommend as proposed, recommend with modifications. We're gonna leave it at that because we're not gonna deny it. That's gonna be recommend or recommend with changes. For the city commission to then consider. So there will be a chance for you to have input into the process before sort of the final draft goes before the city commission. That's gonna be probably the following May. So I would say May of 2025 is what we're really looking at. I expect it to be close to a year-long process of putting that together. The other thing, so the downtown plan, which we're currently in the process of, we've shifted that a little bit back. We had originally hoped to bring the final draft plan to the city commission to adopt. It will be adopted as if it is adopted as a supplement or an appendices to the current growth policy, the 2021 growth policy. We actually shifted that back to June to make sure that we have incorporated all stakeholder comments and recommendations and ideas. But it will come to this board first because it is going to be an appendices of the growth policy. It will come before the Consolidated Land Use Board as a planning item for recommendation to the city commission on approval. Again, if there's modifications, I will say this has been a pretty robust public engagement process for this downtown planning process that's been going on since the summer, last summer. So I'm hoping there's not too many recommendations to make modifications, but yeah, we're looking at having a draft of that before you at the May Consolidated Land Use Board meeting. So that would be the second Wednesday in May. Gateway workshop. We recently held a gateway workshop to look at the gateway areas, which are the points of entry and exit, but for purposes of what we were looking at, the entry into Livingston. Gateway areas, there were 3 areas identified in the growth policy for gateway overlay zoning districts. Those were out by kind of where Albertsons and RY, now Sun Mountain Lumber is. The other one is out by the hospital, where the close to the interchange over there. And then the last one is out by PFL, where Highway 10 hits I-90. So those were already identified in the growth policy. We had a consultant in to get ideas on what people would like to see in those gateway areas. There's different types of treatments for gateways. What do you want to get out of your gateway? Some people focus more on building design and aesthetics. you know, for an area like, Albertsons, and we haven't gotten the report. They're putting together a report on what they got out of that workshop. But let's say like for design and building aesthetics, you know, the area by Albertsons, maybe it's already heavily developed. So maybe that isn't quite the main focus of that gateway. Maybe that's more just sort of an entrance. Maybe there's some sort of signage or traffic calming treatment that would be appropriate to kind of slow people down, indicate, hey, you're leaving Park County, you're coming into the city. So the part that will come before this board, certainly when we have that report, either staff or the consultant, I can't remember what's in our contract with them, but we'll present that to this board. Just the presentation of here is what we found. Here are our recommendations for next steps. Although I'm not eager to embark on additional zoning code updates while the larger code update is going on. I think realistically, we're going to have to make some changes to our code and updates. Or at least recommend them to the commission before that update is finished. And so we may, based on the findings of the consultant from the workshop, what their recommendations are, we may look to incorporate some zoning revisions specifically focused on those gateway areas sooner than later. So in the next 4, 5, 6 months versus waiting until the code update has happened. Certainly anything we do then will be informed. We will, you know, share that with the selected consultant and they'll incorporate this. But as a general rule, if the findings of the Gateway Workshop, if their report says we need to move forward and here there's some sort of low-hanging fruit, some easy things that we can do now, we're likely to move forward with that. And any zoning text amendment does come before the Consolidated Land Use Board because any changes have to go through the Consolidated Land Use Board before they are then brought to the City Commission. And lastly, yeah, just kind of in general, you know, Catherine mentioned the PUD, and this is the plan unit development. It's a new thing for Livingston. It's been going on for years elsewhere, but it is something that allows for developer flexibility to provide public benefits that Livingston has identified that we need. And then we are giving in return for that, we offer incentives to a developer. Maybe it's a density bonus, or maybe it's a certain increase in height in a certain area. So just nothing concrete right now, but we are pretty excited. We have preliminarily met with a developer, staff has, about a potential planned unit development that's coming down the pike. I would say certainly in the next year, possibly in the next 6 months. And so again, the planned unit development, it would be both a zoning, because the planned unit development is an overlay district, so it would be looked at for the zoning change part of it. And then also the development part of it, it's a development plan. That would be looked at by the planning side of it. So this board will look at all of that and then make the recommendation, and then it moves to the City Commission. So those are just a few things that are kind of on our radar. Right now, we do not have any subdivision applications in for review. I have not even met with anybody as a pre-application for a subdivision. So that's, you know, the earliest that would get once we had a pre-application would be probably 3 or 4 months down the road. So I think these are kind of the more near-term things that we're looking at. And then also we have the election of the vice chair of this board at the next meeting. So there's that on your radar. Do y'all have any questions about any of that, or things that you are interested in bringing before? I mean, when we have things that come before you for a public hearing, obviously those are the priority, But that doesn't mean that we, you know, this board, I think we think of it also as kind of a sounding board for, you know, if there's like the plan or the policy or helping us review stuff, if there's things that we want a little bit of input on. So I think that there's, if there's specific areas of growth and development that you are interested in, let me know, because it may be something that we have kind of coming forward, that staff's gonna be working on, and we can just sort of move that up. Or figure out where that works for this.
Just want to mention, Jennifer, like some documents that I've read personally that the rest of the board might, if they have time, think about reading is the growth policy, the subdivision application process, and then the various ordinances that will apply to the work that we're going to. I know some of us are kind of joining the board a little bit blindly and just having that background knowledge for when we get something that comes before us, that we have this idea at least of where to look or what the rules and regulations currently in place are, just so we can know a little bit better what we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that. I have already placed an order for all of you to get a copy of the MCA, the Montana Code Annotated. After the legislative session, they update it every 2 years. Those should be coming out in the next week or two, I think, and you will all get a lovely brand new bound copy of it. I have it earmarked and dog-eared in my office. So that, we're also in the process of, we will be updating, I totally forgot about that. I'm so glad you said that. Sorry. Our subdivision regulations, there's a couple modifications that we needed to make, based on changes that happened, from the legislative session last year. And so, we're working on that now. That will probably come before you. I'm gonna guess maybe May. And then, of course, for recommendation to go before, the city commission. But it's pretty much some more administrative than anything else. And then a few things that are required by, the state changes, but nothing, in my opinion, nothing massive. And also my goal is to, at the same time, rather than to kind of pepper you with it, I'm gonna get everybody a copy, a printed copy, if you would like, of the growth policy. It's probably gonna be in a binder because we don't have like pre-bound ones, but, and then I also will put all this together and send links to the documents. And so actually I will probably, I can't do that with the subdivision regs, but I can do that once we get the Montana Code annotated and it's been posted. I can put that possibly in with the minutes for this meeting, and that way the general public can get it too. But that way you have the hard copy document, but you also have easy access to the digital documents. I find the digital documents super helpful when I want to control F and look for something in particular, especially in Montana Code annotated.
Yeah.
So yeah. And if there's anything else, the regulations, like you were talking about, Municode for our zoning code, they lag quite a bit behind when we pass an ordinance. So like the planned unit development ordinance that I believe we adopted in November and it went into effect in December is still not up there. What I would rather do is I think print Unicode out, and then also the recent, the map amendments for RY and for View Vista and the neighborhood commercial changes for the zoning code that went through. Those will not be updated in Unicode probably for 5 or 6 months. So,
Jen, do you wanna, tell everyone what Municode is?
sorry, Municode is, basically the online, where all of our ordinance is housed. So it's not just zoning code, but it's all city code ordinance. And it's super handy. If you were to print it out, you'd be humongous, but, you can control F it. You can get some Unicode actually, if anybody wants to look, it's, you can put it in Google and just Unicode Livingston, Montana. It'll bring you straight to our code page. Zoning code is chapter 30, subdivision. It's not gonna be very helpful right now because it basically says, see what's scanned on file. We're gonna be putting all that digitally on, but that's chapter 28. you can go in there and find anything you want. Unicode basically houses a lot of, probably the majority, I would say, of municipal codes around the country are on Unicode. So it's understandable that it takes them a while to kind of update because they only have so many people, and every time somebody's updating their code, they have to put those updates in. But yeah, I'm gonna make sure that you guys have all of the information that you need. And like I said, I was trying to just wait until the MCA booklets were available. They're gonna be mailed to me and then I can distribute them. But then I can also send out the digital to that once it's online and send out the list of those to everybody and also post them with the minutes for this meeting. Bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bailey, for that.
Yeah, one thing I did, guys, just for our crew, is I just created like a Google Doc, like a folder for myself in Drive. Sailor stop. So sorry, guys. So like when I need to reference something, it's pulled up in the Google folder for me personally, and then I can, that's my child, sorry. And then when we're like reading things just for personal reference, you can go in and search it quick. So if you have your computer, you're not kind of just sitting there going like, I don't know what's happening. You can kind of peruse it for yourself and have those most updated copies. But Jennifer will have that for us, just so you kind of know what's going on. But that's just me. If you have a paper copy version that you prefer, highlight it, sticky note the junk out of it, and just use your own system. But they do have it all online on the city's website that you can make your own system to be informed if you want.
Thank you. You guys have any questions?
She really wants to go to the beach, so sorry, guys.
I feel like if I were in Hawaii, I would as well, so you should take her.
One thing I was just gonna ask about, or one thing that might be helpful would be like, I don't know if the city has like a capital improvement plan or something, but just like, some sort of information about infrastructure and needs and future planning, because I think that comes up a lot in subdivision requests, and it's been really hard, during some of these subdivision, reviews to get straight answers. So it'd be nice to know what the plan is and what some of those issues are on things like the water loop and so it'd be nice if there was ever a light month to have Shannon talk about some of the infrastructure.
We can certainly have Shannon talk about it. We do not have an updated capital improvement plan. I believe the one that's in place technically ended in 2020. That said, every time we do a new annual budget, the capital improvement projects are in there as far as what's funded and what's coming down the pike. So, but yeah, we can do that, but that's not something, a formal document, just as well as a strategic plan. We're going to be working to put that in place because our strategic plan for the city sunsets this year.
And are you saying that a capital improvement plan will be part of a new strategic plan?
I don't know that it would be part of that, but I believe we'll have, I can check with our city manager. I'm pretty sure that would be separate. But those, once you have sort of one informs the other, right? So you decide where you're, and again, based on perhaps growth policy, whatever, what improvements you're going to make. And then the strategic plan, the one that we have now is like from 2019 to 21, 24, which is quite a long span. In my opinion, for a strategic plan, for a city that's changing as fast as we are. But yeah, it will, then they'll kind of inform each other. So I don't know what comes first. I don't know how Grant wants to do that. But yeah, I'm not sure it'll be part of it, but they'll be done in conjunction.
I just think Jonathan's comment is well taken, at least to me, that it rings true, that kind of like, it sounds like we have those infrastructure discussions kind of ad hoc with each discussion of a potential development. And so that sounds to me like something that would be really useful for this board and for the commission, to have, you know, some document that is more than, and this is not to take away from the info that Shannon shares with us, but is like more than just kind of what we hear from Shannon at a meeting.
Yeah, the projects, that's a project list. You're talking about something ahead of time that we're.
Yeah, something that
Yep.
kind of like gives a vision to that project list a little bit.
Understood.
And I know that's not your job.
Streamlined form.
I'm happy to bring that back to Grant. It's already on his radar, but yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, in lieu of having a chair do this, we have no zoning items. Do you guys have any board comments? I mean, you've kind of been making them, I guess, throughout, which is fine.
Thanks for running the meeting so well with you absence of a chair.
Yeah, this is not what you would normally expect. It's more normal than this usually.
Well, I
to take-
think, I have a question.
Yeah.
You send us the agendas. Should we print them out if we want a hard copy of them, or are they something?
Yes,
Okay.
we're not gonna print out the packet, necessarily. I mean, if that is what you would prefer, you know, when we have like a public hearing packet, like a subdivision packet, those are a lot of pages.
Yeah.
So, it's just really hard for us to do that and get it all done ahead of time, but if you have a need and you really want that, talk to me and we'll.
Okay.
something out. But yeah, it's gonna look like, bless you, that format, so it'll be planning, zoning. And then, board comments, and then, there's no more board comments. Sometimes the best part is the adjournment.
Sometimes.
Yeah, so then I will adjourn this meeting at 6:49. And thank you all. The next Consolidated Land Use Board meeting is going to be. What month are we in? April, so second Tuesday in April. I'm sorry, I don't have the date handy, but second Tuesday in April, Wednesday in April. Second Wednesday in
I was
April.
gonna say,
No, second Wednesday in April, at 5:30. So thanks very much, and, go take your daughter to the beach. Have fun, Bailey.
I will. Bye, guys. Thank you.